So obviously, I spend a lot of time thinking about thinking and how I and we, um, rhetorical we, can think better, how we can be more rational, more logical, how we can have the mental toughness to, as we identify flaws in our minds and how we think, how we can actually improve upon them and all that stuff. So naturally, when you're thinking about that a lot, you try and think about when it breaks bad and why it breaks bad. And one of the things I keep coming back to is, I think for many people, they have the capability to an extent. It's a spectrum, as all things are. Some people are better, some people are worse. But I think most people, when you look at aggregate and you kind of look at the average person, they have the capability to think better. They have the capability to be logical, to be almost mathematical in their thinking, very rational, try and, be objective. And they have some degree of mental toughness that allows them to identify when they may not be thinking objectively, not be thinking right. But what often happens is there are certain topics, and this probably isn't a surprise. This is relatively obvious, but there are certain topics where the belief you have, the view you have, the values you have around a certain topic are so deep rooted that they just turn off your ability to use it. So it's not that you don't have it at all, right? It's that when it comes to certain topics, and oftentimes they're ones that matter a lot, it's as if your mind turns off or forgets how to use those skills. And I've talked recently about Hitler, Adolf Hitler, and how there was this interesting dichotomy because when you read about him and read some of his writing and some of the things he said, as horrific of a person as he was, there's certain aspects of his thinking, like when he talked about propaganda and how to influence people, that is very sophisticated in the thinking. And it shows some of those skills of how to think better, how to think logically, and really understand things at a very deep level, and to see where other people have made mistakes and perhaps where he even made mistakes and how he needed to adjust. And obviously, he rose to a level of power because of that. But then there's other areas like his views of Jews, obviously, and many people outside of the Aryan race, and just his general view on human nature and how society should function, that seemingly applied no critical thinking, no logic, no mental toughness at all. It was just kind of almost this blind, basic, unsophisticated, rudimentary, insane in many ways line of thinking. And you wonder, how does that happen? And when you dig in on an example like Hitler, you start to see there are aspects of his upbringing, German culture, and values that Germans had, not obviously to the extent necessarily of the Holocaust and killing millions of people, but there is, Nietzsche is somebody I've spoken about recently too. There was a way of thinking around that time that was that Germans are a uniquely special breed of people that should be the most prominent people in life, and that the laws of nature in many ways dictate that survival of the fittest. They should be at that position. So you can explain at kind of a first level how Hitler got to where he got to, but that second level of like, but he seemed smarter than that. He seemed to understand and have a level of sophistication. He seemed to have some of the traits that should have accounted for that, should have caught that and seen that the way he was thinking didn't make sense. But those values coming, through his upbringing and the culture that he lived in were so deep rooted that again, it's as if he turned it off. He was just totally blind to it. He became, as I talk about all the time, you can think about a PhD level of thinking and a kindergarten level of thinking. He became preschool level of thinking when it came to that topic. When it came to thinking about how people should be treated and what you do about people that are different than you and Jews and what's the right way in which society should function and democracy and people's rights, he seemingly had no ability to think about it. And that really fascinates me. And I think you can carry it over to tons of other examples, even right now. We're in the midst of this election still between Trump and Biden. And, as I talk to people on either side, you see remnants of that. You see examples of that. You see people who, for various reasons, want so badly for their side to win or their person to win. And when I talk to them, you see them almost in real time turning off those aspects of their brain that they would have when it comes to some other topic. They want so badly for Trump to win or for Biden to win that as they start to look at the scenario and start to play it out, they will grasp onto anything that fits the narrative they believe in, that fits the values they believe in. If it's voter fraud or manipulation that's happening, or if it's anybody that supports one of the candidates is evil or racist or whatever it is, they are willing to buy into that with almost no critical thinking, no questioning, no objectivity, no mental toughness to question themselves or their side and see what they might be doing wrong. All of that dissipates. All of that seemingly gets turned off, and the result is what you have. You have irrational, emotional, partisan, all these views that are not helpful. But again, what's most interesting about it, because I think many people know that, right? The idea that we become emotional and we don't think as clearly. What's so fascinating about it to me is that people are seemingly helpless to it. They're blind to it, or at least don't appear to be aware of it. And when it happens, it's extremely hard to turn off. It's extremely hard to fix. And in many ways, that's what I'm trying to do with these videos. I'm trying to figure out the right approach to scale it in some way, to get people to step back and think and realize, how can I be more objective in this case? And it's a problem. I mean, it's a huge, huge problem. And it fits right into the storyline of the way our minds work, where we always want a cohesive narrative. That tucks right into this whole story because, as I said, when a narrative is provided to you that ties in with the values you have or the belief you have or the side you have, our willingness to buy into that and latch onto it is frankly just way too high. The threshold is way too low. We question way too little. And again, I'll bring it back to Hitler, at the ending here. In many ways, that's what happened to him. He read, philosophers and different people. He heard from different people, anti-Semites and Nietzsche and Richard Wagner and all these different people who had really strong views about what the Germans should be and how they should be prominent. And it fit so nicely into what he wanted that it took over his brain, and he just believed with absolute certainty that was the right approach. And then the worst part of it is it starts to become self-propelling. As you start to believe those things and you hear more about it and it fits the narrative, you become more certain and you believe it more, and you just get dug in more and more. So just a scary but fascinating phenomenon of how the mind works to me, and something that in many ways is at the root of what needs to be solved for.